Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. I am awaiting my video to confirm. There we go. It looks like I'm live. Hello, 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 hello. Welcome. I'm going to put these in, see if I can't get even better sound. Welcome to James' Spiritual Sunday. It is my honor to be meeting with you. There we go. Looks like I'm good. So today we're going to address the question, how do we end slavery now? How do we end slavery in the world immediately today? Welcome to James MacNeil's Spiritual Sunday. My name is James MacNeil, Shock of Shocks. Where love is the answer, what's the question? So today's question is, how do we end slavery now? How do we end slavery today? Today is going to be a very powerful message I'm very excited about, and I hope that you will like, love, comment, share, and seriously comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your opinions. Feel free to watch the other shows. Give me your feedback. It's based on feedback that I create the next episode. A number of weeks ago, I did, my very first one was, did Satan win a Grammy? And we were talking about Sam Smith's performance at the Grammys, where Sam Smith was wearing a top hat with red horns, like he's the devil. They are the devil. And the outrage was that that was a satanic ritual. And so I created a show on that. And when I said, that's not a satanic ritual, that's a performance. Those are artists. Some people fed back to me, but you're being naive. There's a real thing of Satanism, and Satanism there's some high-powered, elitist satanic power group that are pedophiles, and they run Hollywood and Washington. I'm like, oh, okay. And then, so fine, I start looking into seeing if I can wrap my head around that in my heart, which is unbearable. And then I see that Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs have been released, letting people know who went to his island, where apparently there was sex trafficking and, children being sexually assaulted and traumatized. I don't know all the facts behind these things. What I do know is, heart-wrenching, right? Mind-boggling. And then that provoked the conversation around this sex slavery, right? And so I said, I got to look into this slavery thing. Now, if you're anything like me, you may have thought that slavery was predominantly the American story of Black slavery, right, coming from Africa. And we know the tragedy of that story. However, slavery's been around forever, almost ever, and apparently it's at an all-time high. I went to the UN website, and they say there are 50 million slaves today, 50 million. And if you're wondering how many that is, that's 1 in every 150. Or if there's 300 people in your area, 2 of them are slaves. I'm in Playa del Carmen, Mexico right now, and this is a place of 30,000 people. If there's 30,000 people, that means 2,000 are slaves. And I'm going, that can't be real. What are they calling a slave? Now, I'm guessing they want us to see an outrageous problem. And it is an outrageous problem. Let's not kid ourselves. However, when I looked into what are they defining as slavery, we're not talking about people necessarily being captured in one country, dragged to another country, and sold, in a market. However, sadly, that is happening. That's unbelievable. But what the UN calls slavery today is anyone who is being forced to work at a job they don't want to work at, or someone who is being forced into marriage. So then I'm looking at that, I'm like, wait, how much force are we talking about here? Because if you study the stats, 50 to 95, depending on which research, right? 50 to 95% of employees hate their jobs. What does that mean? 50 to 95% of humanity are slaves? because they hate their jobs, because they, quote, have to. Now, I am not saying this to minimize or to make it sound like slavery isn't absolutely abhorrent and unforgivable. Like, I'm not diminishing. What I'm diminishing is the stats. If they're saying everyone who doesn't like their job is a slave, well, then what we're doing is we're dishonoring those who really are, those who are truly being enslaved. And when I looked at the numbers, 28 million are enslaved to labor, right? Forced labor. And 22 million, I think my math is right, are forced into marriages. So then I looked into that one, and because maybe you, like I, have seen these horrific things where this old perv marries a 12-year-old girl and whatever, it's heart-wrenching stuff that you may have seen online. So I look at it and it's like, no, anytime that it's an arranged marriage, the UN can call it slavery. But here's another problem. I had a friend from India, and she told me that she met her husband once for a couple of minutes before they were married. And she said they're very happily married and they didn't choose each other. And I thought, well, that just seems so wrong. And she says, well, call it wrong if you will, but we're happily married and you're not. Like, not me necessarily. I think I was single at the time, but she was saying North Americans, or people outside of her culture, they make up their own minds and then they change their minds. And she said, I believe my parents knew best, and I believe his parents knew best, and here we are happily ever after. She says, when you think the other person is supposed to make you happy, that's one of the broken things about marriage. And she says, arranged marriages are the happiest marriages, happy and non-divorce. And so the stats, sadly, are in her favor. And if people are calling that slavery, they could maybe clean up their definitions. Again, I could be off, but based on my limited research, it seems like the UN might be exaggerating numbers. But let's not lose the fact that, OMG, there's still slavery in the world. Come on now. So it's horrific, it's horrific, it's horrific. I don't think the numbers are that large. I think their definition creep, the creeping of the definition, the expansion of the definition has lightened the potency of the point, which is there's slavery. Okay, so there's slavery. So then now, unacceptable, horrific, can't happen. All right, so then how do we end slavery? So then I remember I was watching a thing on drug cartels once on TV, and I thought, what do you do? What do you do? The war on drugs, right? The war on drugs. Well, the Tao Te Ching, I forget which verse, maybe 35, forgive me. The Tao Te Ching basically says, I'll not quote perfectly, says, if you remove all crimes, people will naturally return to love. If you remove all crimes, now what is law, the legal system, crime and punishment? What it says is it is more egoic transactional, which means I do not commit a crime because it's wrong. No, I'm cool with doing wrong. I'm not going to do this crime because I might get caught. If I get caught, I'm going to have to pay a punishment, pay a penalty, or I'm going to be inconvenienced. So for my selfish reasons, I'm not going to commit a crime. Well, how far are we going? When people drive through a school zone and they're looking for cops, not kids, something's broken in our system. And so the criminalization of things may or may not work. And there's history around the legalization of drugs, which diminished the drugs and diminished crime and healed a society. So I'm not going to get into that because what do I know? But now let's get back to the question. How do we end slavery? How do we end slavery? Good. So then I look at the drug war and I think, well, you could attack the consumer, right? The person who's taking the drugs. And cops are like, what does that do? It doesn't really change anything. You lock up one kid doing, smoking some weed. It doesn't change the problem. So what you want to do, they would say, is get to the dealer, and not just the dealer, but their dealer, and not their dealer, but their dealer. And if you can take down a cartel, boom, then there'll be no more drugs on earth. Well, we know that's ridiculous, because when there is a market for something, there will be people monetizing the market. Okay, so now how do we end slavery today? Good. So you can go after the consumer, the person who has an addiction, whether that addiction is for drugs or an addiction for sex or an addiction for so a lot of the slave labor, by the way, a lot of the slavery, according to the UN, is forced labor. And so it's not necessarily sexual, not to say that there's always exclusivity in these disturbing stories, but slave labor. So who would hire a slave laborer? Well, someone who is what? Selfish, greedy, addicted to what? Power, addicted to money. In fact, blurring the lines between slavery and drugs again, when I was watching this special on the drug cartels, this one retired guy, like I think basically he said, I'm only between jobs, I'm not retired. He's still in the drug business, I think, this guy, older guy. And he said, once you've made ridiculous amounts of money in the drug trade, it's not about the money, it's about the power. He said the addiction is the power. So he was addicted to power. He may have first needed money to feed his family, but soon thereafter, it moved on from money for survival to money for power. And power seems to be one of the addictions. Okay. So if a person is consuming slave labor, that person may be addicted to power or money. Okay, so then the person's addicted to drugs or pornography or whatever, prostitution. So then we've got the people who are addicted to that, but then we've got the dealers who are also, they're addicted to something, right? And then we start saying, okay, let's peel this onion. How far back do we have to go before we get free of this thing called slavery? Well, slavery, let's simplify it for this conversation to expand and make my point. It's a compulsion from which an individual does not feel free. So am I a slave to my workaholism, which is something I've battled? As a person, a slave to pornography, a slave to drugs, a slave to whatever. All right, so who's not a slave is the next question, right? Who's not a slave? So if the consumer is the slave, the dealer is a slave, if there's slavery all the way through that food chain, whether it's drugs or human trafficking, slavery, then the question becomes, who is a slave? Good. I started with it, we're still there. Who's a slave? Well, the Bible says we're all slaves. And they might say, hey, back off, don't throw the Bible at me. I didn't throw anything at you. I used the Tao Te Ching, pick on somebody else. But in the Bible, 25 times, 25, not once, 25 times it says you're a slave, you're a slave, you're a slave, you're a slave. In the Matrix, you're a slave, Neo, you're a slave. You're a prisoner of your mind. The Matrix is the world that's been pulled over your eyes to hide you from the truth. And the truth is you're a slave. And so who is a slave? The answer is we're all slaves. Now, what is slavery then? Let's simplify it. And I'm not talking about the overt, horrible, horrific, true, hardcore, someone was captured and held against their will for any form of slavery. I'm now talking about something else. The birthplace of all of that kind of slavery is all slavery, which is we're slaves. Now, what does that mean? That means I feel compelled and I don't feel free to choose. So as long as I have any dependency in my system, any dependency at all, to that degree, I'm a slave. And once I'm a slave, then my dependency, when a person is desperate, if a person is drowning, they cannot be expected to be reasonable or other-centric or respectful. When a person is drowning and desperate, they're going to do whatever they have to do to get what they need. A drowning person in a pool needs air. A drowning person, as far as a drug addiction, needs their fix. And when people need at that level, they do things they wouldn't otherwise do. And so it is a basic form of slavery that we all have that can, when inflamed, make us a consumer of that which is called slavery. Does that make sense now? So if we as a society, if you as an individual, if I as an individual stop being a slave, if I stop being a slave, needing anything, that's the birthplace of fresh air in the world. That's the birthplace of divine love in the world. See, I believe you and I are here on purpose with the reason for this season. We're all divine love ambassadors. I believe it is my job, primarily, more than anything, to experience, express, and expand divine love on earth. If I can get over all need and I can simply bring seeds of love and kindness and patience, forgiveness, acceptance, if I can be that change agent, if I can no longer be a consumer, a desperate consumer that is, then all of a sudden I've begun the healing of this story. Slavery is born in all of us. If I need anything, if I need anybody, this dependency, this codependence is the birthplace of the entire story of slavery. Now, if you look at all the, what are the worst things that humans are doing right now for the planet, for the future, for the chances, right? Well, war, you can't diminish that, right? When humans kill humans, you can't hide. That's not cool. And then we got war, we've got abuse of the environment, abuse of animals, we've got violent crime, we've got drugs, we've got slavery, we've got did I write something else down? Oh, I just put crime. Now, all of these are perpetrated by people who are slaves to something. So what the Bible uses, and you might not like this, but it says we're all slaves to sin. And you might say, oh, there he goes. No, I'm not. No. So most people don't understand what the word sin means. Sin just means not together. It just means we're not hanging out. We're not close, right? So the word righteous just means right relationship. The word sin, hamartia, means not together. So the number one word used in the New Testament related to the word sin is hamartia, which is ha, not, and martia, together. Not together is what sin is. And so in archery, they used to, the bullseye and then sin 1, sin 2, sin 3, which is how many steps of separation or not togetherness. So if we're together, we're what's called righteous. Righteous means right relationship. And you might say, well, are you preaching this God or that religion? No, but I am talking about divine love by whatever name. So your own higher self, divine love, the universal divine love. The Bible says God is love. All mathematical equations can be reversed. So love is what some of us call God, and some of us have other names. Okay, cool. So love. So when I'm connected to love, I'm just like, Phil, cool, don't need anything. I will not cross character lines to impose or need anything. The secret is for me to be free. If I'm free, that's the beginning of all of us being free. And the way I find my freedom is to find my wellness. To say, I need nothing, I need no one, I'm at peace. I live in a perpetual state of gratitude. I live with an attitude of gratitude. To say, I need nothing, I need no one. You might say, well, we have physiological needs. I know, I got it. But it's not as hard to meet your actual physical needs, especially in a first world environment, and depending on where you are in the world. I encourage you to find a way to get your basics covered and lower your stress to say, I need nothing. Here's a little exercise for you. See how happy you can be with as little as possible. What I mean by that is, see if you can't just get one cookie and say, oh, right? Like a child, one thing, just one thing. Feel the breeze on your face. See the smile of someone. This morning here in Mexico, I went to get a new jug of water, big 20-liter jug, and my jug was cracked. And so if it's cracked, you have to buy a new one. You can't just replace it. Long story. So I go in there, bunch of can't do it, but I admitted to him it's cracked. I could have pretended it wasn't cracked and got a new one. Long story short, make friends. He doesn't speak any English. I don't think he likes the fact that I don't speak fluent Spanish, but he's found his way to love me anyway. And so we ended up partnering up on this thing and pouring the jug from another brand into my jug. And he helped me out. He went the extra mile, stopped doing his job just to help me. And in that moment, I'm like, oh, humanity rocks. I love humans. And I could find joy in that moment at having overcome a challenge with someone who was loving, kind. Now you might say, well, James, who cares about you and your little water bottle? Here's what matters. How easy is it for you to be happy? How little does it take for you to be content? To be content, to be happy, is the birthplace to end slavery. If I will be happy, I'm a little light. If I can experience and exude what's called in the Bible the fruit of the Spirit, which means the evidence of one who's connected to divine love is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. If I can live that, I can be that. If I can be non-desperate, right? Not needy or greedy, not codependent, not dependent, but interdependent, to say, let's see how far we can take this planet. Let's see how great we can make this country, whatever country you're in. How great can we make this community, this family? How can I best bring love into this moment? These are the cures to slavery inch by inch, step by step. We can chase down the consumers. We can chase down the slave masters, the people who somehow create this slavery thing. Or we as a people can begin a wellness virus, a love virus, and say, as for me, I'm fine. As for me, I'm at peace. I need nothing. I need no one. I am here to serve. Estoy aquí para servir. It's one of the first things I learned in Spanish. I'm here to serve. Jesus said, I've come not to be served, but to serve. And if we can find our wellness and enter into the day, into the marketplace, into this world, not with need, but with seed of love, patience, kindness, acceptance, forgiveness, grace. If we can be the light in the darkness, that light will become powerful. And just like if you've ever seen one of those little candle ceremonies where there's one candle and everyone's holding a candle, but one's lit and they pass the flame and each one passes the flame, and you watch this flame just fill. It could be a building or it could be a field. I've been a part of candlelight vigils, candlelight rituals. And all of a sudden you realize that one candle can change the world. And so I call upon you, my dear friend, to partner with me. Let's end slavery. Let's end it now. And we end it by not being a slave to desperation, separation and desperation. We can come together as human beings. I can be well, and I can lead with love. So in closing, there's no freedom where there is dependence. There is no freedom where there is dependence. And the only true freedom is the walk away ability. Can you walk away from your habits? Can you walk away from your phone? Can you do without your phone for a minute? Can you do without whatever, the stimulation, the drug, the whatever it is? The more you can do without, the more you become a light, and the more you're part of ending slavery in the world today. Let's, as a group of individuals, get well, get happy, get healthy, shine a light, change the world. Let's end slavery. Please put your comments in here. Ask me anything, give me heck, call me names, it happens. And let me know what topics you think would be wise for me to tackle next. Again, welcome to, and thank you for joining me at James MacNeil's Spiritual Sunday, where I seek to bring the light of divine love into today's topics, and where the answer is always love. What's the question? Today's question was, how do we end slavery now? My ask of you is that you subscribe to the channel, like, love, comment, share, get this message out there, and challenge me. Let me know what you want me to talk about next. That's how this happened. People attacked me for my video on did Satan win a Grammy, and it gave birth to this conversation around slavery. Let's continue the conversations, and let's bring the light of love into the dark spaces. Love, joy, and peace. Bless.